Hi everybody, I'm Suzanne Sherman. Some of you might know me as a Red Hot Chili Prepper. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about canning meat and stock as part of your long-term food preservation plan. As we know, ensuring you get enough protein can really make a difference in a survival situation. Where I live, we hunt big game, and it's really easy to fill that freezer up fast. Canning our harvest ensures that we can have some space available in our freezer for other supplies. So without further delay, let's get started. So here goes the meat on the bones. Whoops. Because I have so much meat on these pieces of bone that I'm putting in, I'm probably not going to use these scraps. I have them cut up ready to go, but everything I have on here is going to be enough to give us the calcium, glucosamine, chondroitin, collagen that we're looking for in a stock like this. I'm going to toss in some vegetables. Again, some people choose to roast them ahead of time and then add them towards the end. You can do that. You can pretty much just do whatever you want. I'm going to add a little bit more water, and then we're going to let this go on a simmer until morning. Okay, so this has been simmering overnight. The house smells amazing. I have preheated these glass jars because you obviously want to avoid rapid fluctuations in temperature because that will break your glass, and nobody wants to go through all this effort and then at the end of processing find that your jars are broken and their precious contents spilled in the water. So we're going to pour the contents in here a little at a time, and you want to leave about 1 inch of headspace. And by the way, get one of these little funnels. It makes it so much easier to do your processing. I try to leave about 1 inch of headspace before we put the lid on the jar. Headspace is the air space between whatever you're canning and the top of the jar. I have the lids, so these are the jars. If you're new to canning, these are called the lids, and you want to have take out of hot water, wipe the surface of the jars so you have a clean point of contact between the jar and the lid. It's very important so you get a proper seal. You also want to dry off this part here, which I've done. I'm going to take one more out of here. Wipe this off. Now you want to take the ring and attach this to the top. Finger tight, doesn't have to be super tight. Couple words about these products here. There's been a shortage of canning supplies, jars, lids, rings, pressure canners. Been very, very difficult to find this past year. So my advice to you is get them when you can if you ever see an opportunity. If you don't have them, if you have a friend with a pressure canner, work out a trade or a barter. So let's put this into the cooker now. As you can see, I've already placed 5 of the jars in here, and you can process 7 quarts at a time. This is a 21 quart stock pot, or I'm sorry, pressure canner. And it doesn't matter, some of the water goes up to the very top, it can even be covered. So now what I'm going to do is take some olive oil. This model does not have a gasket. I prefer this style because a gasket is one more thing to fail that you're going to have to replace later on. What I'm doing now is taking a little olive oil, so this will have some lubrication and I can take the lid off more easily when it's ready. Here's the lid, and then I'm going to match up the arrow with this indent here. Oops. There we go. You're going to lock this top down a little bit at a time, and you want to do it sequentially. A little bit at a time. And now once it's even, you want to tighten everything down in opposition to each other. So now it's nice and even. I'm going to turn up the heat. And now we're going to wait for a nice steam for this to vent out for about 10 minutes.
Okay, so now we have a nice big vent of steam. This has been going on for 10 minutes. Once it's been venting for 10 minutes, you want to put on the weight. This is the weight. I always advise you to have more than one. I have set this to 15 pounds. If you are above 1,000 feet in altitude, you need to go from 10 pounds up to 15 pounds. Now we're going to let the pressure build up, and as soon as this guy starts rattling, we're going to count off 20 minutes. That's all you need to do when it's stock only. When I process the ground meat, we'll explain the differences in that one. So now we wait.
All right, so as you can tell, we've got a nice rattle going. There are a couple ways to test to see if your pressure canner's reached optimal pressure. One is this little meter here, and I'll tell you, I've never really gotten mine to be reliable, to read reliably. When I was in California, it would never go above 5 pounds. Here, I've never gotten it to show above 10 pounds. And at sea level, I needed it to be at 10. Up here in the mountains at 6,500 feet, I need it to be at 15. So rather than relying on something mechanical, I'm relying on my ears. You want to get this rattling about 4 times a minute, 3 or 4 times a minute. As you can tell, it's pretty consistent right now. So I've backed the heat off. Once I'm done recording, I'll back it off a little bit more. And after 20 minutes of processing, we'll shut the heat off and then we'll tell you what to do next. The stock has been processing for 20 minutes and we've removed the heat. And now it's just cooling down on its own. You never want to remove the weight from the vent early because that will affect the seals and it won't seal properly if at all. So now we're just going to let that cool down on its own, and in the meantime I'm going to get ready for the processor some ground elk that I ground up and cooked yesterday. Now a lot of times when you get instructions on how to pressure can foods, they will have you take something that's already just been cooked immediately. Take something that's very hot, put it in hot jars, and then put it in a hot pressure canner. When you're processing a lot of foods and various types of foods over days like I am, logistically that's not possible. It's perfectly acceptable to take food that has been cooled down or even refrigerated overnight and then get it ready for processing and slowly raise the temperature. So let me show you now. Again, here is a jar that I did the other day. And here's the finished product of some venison. I'm going to show you how to can meat so it comes out like this. So let me get everything together. I mentioned this little item earlier. This is just a canning funnel. Fits perfectly in both the wide mouth and regular mouth jars. And you can get them at any retailer, online, or brick and mortar. Really helps, particularly when you're dealing with foods that are solid, and just makes it so you can save some time. Now also when you're cooking this, any kind of meat that you're going to process, it doesn't have to be cooked completely through because it's going to finish cooking in the processor. So I get it cooked all the way, but it doesn't have to be overdone. And again, if some of it's still pink, it's really not a big deal. So I'm going to want to push some of it down in here. Now you want to add some liquid in here. Now I usually add water, but from the last batch of stock I made, I had some left over. So I'm going to incorporate that in here. Ooh, that's kind of messy. But again, we'll wipe that off. So you see all these bubbles that are in here. Once you pour that in, you want to use your spatula and free these little air pockets and bubbles in there. Now I can add a little bit more. Again, about 1 inch of headspace. And let me get my towel. And because I spilled, definitely going to need to wipe this down. Put my lid. Dry that so we have a dry surface connecting the sealing portion to the jar and the ring. Finger tight. And I will be processing at least 7 quarts of these. And we'll see how that goes.
Now let's quickly get back to the stock.
Okay, so these have been processing for over 20 minutes, at which time I turned the heat off and let this cool. You want to allow the pressure to dissipate on its own. You never want to remove the weight when there's still a lot of pressure because, as I mentioned earlier, it will affect how the jars seal. In fact, might prevent some from sealing at all. Use something to protect your hands because if it is still hot, you will absolutely feel it. And I know this is hot. Sometimes you can leave it for hours, but right now we're going to get this done. Check for pressure. Just a little bit, so we're good. Now we're going to start loosening these up. The handles will also be very hot, so bear that in mind. And this is why I put some olive oil on at the beginning as well. This pops right off. I don't know if you can hear it, but I already hear the lids popping. So I'm just going to let these hang out a little bit, and then once it cools a little bit more, they'll be sealed, and then I'm going to let them cool on this wire rack. So I've got 7 quarts here ready to come out. Typically I like to wait a little bit longer, but I've got another batch of the ground elk that I need to get started on. We're on a bit of a time crunch today. 2 really cool tools for grabbing the jars, and then also so you don't burn yourself. There you go. And we're going to set these individually on here. This one batch, I cleared off the other ones so they can cool. You can see it's still bubbling. They'll continue to do that for a few hours. Test it when it cools down. If the jar pops back up and it didn't seal properly, it's not a big deal. You can always reprocess it with another batch you have going on, or simply use it, but it's not a problem if you have to process it again. So I'm not going to film the part where we process the ground elk here, because everything's the same with one exception, and that's the time it takes for processing. This is cold to the touch, so I'm going to start off with cooler water, warm it up slowly, and then nothing changes. I still wait the 10 minutes for it to vent. Time for processing quart jars with meat. By the way, never ever use anything other than pressure canning for meat. This will be 90 minutes with the weight rattling. So 90 minutes at 15 pounds. If you're using a pint jar, it's 75 minutes. I've been saying there's a lot of stuff that you can do, you know, make things up as you go with regards to recipes and how you make whatever it is you're canning, be it stocks or chilies or stews or just the ground meat. The things that never change are the safety items, making sure it's properly sealed. When you decide to open it, check the seal, make sure it's still sealed. If you see any kind of bubbles in there, don't eat it, just throw it away. Nothing is worth getting sick over. So I'm going to process these for 90 minutes. Everything else is the same. 90 minutes at 15 pounds at my altitude. Again, if you're at sea level, it's going to be 10 pounds. 90 minutes, the time doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the amount of weight. So at sea level or up to 1,000 feet for a pint jar, 75 minutes at 10 pounds. That's all you really got to remember. I hope you enjoyed this video. Just remember, you can also find more great food preservation methods and heaps of other tips, tricks, and techniques in the Lost Frontier Handbook. So don't hesitate to click the button below and share this video with a friend if you found it useful. Thanks for watching. Again, I'm Suzanne Sherman.